Okay, and the viewer's choice I'm covering today, today comes from John. Thank you for this. And this is a very, very interesting one. Very, very scary. John is driving along the M25 and has actually rare footage of it moving. He's passing the junction for the A10, and keep an eye on the lorry in front in the left lane. Now the lorry decides to move into the left lane. Now at this point in time, those of us that are watching this clip for the first time would not see a problem. So you've got the exit for the A10, and you've got obviously the elongated markings denoting that is now a lane that's exiting the A10. Now, we will come on to this later. Some people and some instructors tell you that it's okay to overtake on the left when you're in a dedicated exit lane. I don't agree with that at all, personally. Now, I'm happy to be proved wrong with facts, but I haven't seen anywhere official that says if you're in a dedicated exit lane, you can now overtake on the left. I don't. Now the lorry actually, if we zoom in, is doing exactly that. They are overtaking on the left. So they've moved into that lane, potentially are exiting. And from what you see later, it's very likely they are exiting, but they are now overtaking on the left. So that would be the interesting one for me, because I think you could, with how busy it is, you could be looking at getting pulled for that if you were doing it. Now, this is the shocking bit. What John actually tells us in the email, we're now coming up towards a sign. And if we zoom in on that, most of you will recognize this sign. And it says, the left lane is now closed. There is a stranded vehicle. So that now is illegal to be driving in that lane. And so now what John says is they'd already passed a couple of these. So that's not the first sign. Even if it is the first sign, that's not good enough. But that is now very, very poor from the HGV, and keep an eye on what happens. Oh, it's the sort of one that makes your stomach stand on edge, isn't it? You've got a stranded vehicle, clear problem with the front offside tyre. Now, I can't see whether the person's managed to get out. I hope they had, because this sort of one, it does trigger me a little bit, because I lost a mate, unfortunately, and as you get older, it does get harder to find people that have not known people killed on the roads. And this is not a hard shoulder, of course, but my friend was in a hard shoulder, and his pregnant missus was throwing up due to being sick, morning sickness and all that, and he unfortunately stayed in the vehicle, which was a fatal mistake. There was a Portuguese delivery driver on too tight a schedule, fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into the back of my friend and killed him. And I think the tragic bit about all that, I'm getting goosebumps now, but the tragic bit about all that is James survived, I think it was either 2 or 3 tours of Afghanistan unharmed, and was then killed on our roads. So I hope this person managed to get out, because it's one of my absolute fears when I see people sitting in a vehicle. Now, some people, of course, if you're disabled, you cannot exit the vehicle, you've got to stay. So the advice in the highway code is you keep your hazards on, keep your seatbelt on, and you ring 999 immediately. That's the reason why, because you just need one person out of all these people amongst here, one person that is just paying not enough attention, asleep at the wheel on their phone, and you've got that fatality again. Yeah, from a HGV driver, as a HGV driver myself, you can see when he moves into the left lane, he's on a bend, so he can't see that stranded vehicle, but he's passed the signs telling him there's a stranded vehicle. That's just absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. And he's so late to actually put the right signal back on to come back out. He's so late in doing so. That's just someone that's not paying attention. They've got one thing on their mind: I want to get here. I find that really, really disturbing, because that person has our lives in their hands, and I don't think that's good enough at all. Now, interesting one that I want your opinions on. So John's driving very well. You can see the speed's around 50 miles an hour. Now it says 40 miles an hour. John's probably, look, he is a little bit over the limit here. So he's, according to his dash cam, doing 50 miles an hour. The whole carriageway is over the speed limit, let's face it. So look, I'm not gonna pick up things here too much. The only thing I would say is there's a bit of a thing online, you know, everyone debates overtaking on the left, and it's a bit subjective. Rule 268, congested conditions. When you have congested conditions, you can overtake on the left or keep up with your lane. If you look at this bit, when the van passes John, now in these conditions, personally, what I would say to my learner, the van has only just passed a little bit, but to my learner, I would now say that van is in front of us, so we will hold back. There'll be people that think I'm wrong in doing that, and that's fine. And I know Black Belt Barrister has said, like, in these sorts of conditions, you're not probably going to be prosecuted for overtaking on the left. But personally, I still don't do it. It's not congested. Yes, I understand it's busy, but there's nowhere in the highway code that actually states when you are in a reduced speed limit, you can now overtake on the left. So again, I personally don't, and it's just this moment where we now pass the white van, is that's the only advice I would offer, is that personally I wouldn't. And I think, look, if you disagree with me, it's absolutely fine. But yeah, John's interestingly the only one that's leaving any sort of following distance as usual. There's those of us that will do it, and John's doing very well there. And then there's plenty of people that are just packed in like sardines and just not even leaving breathing space between you. And then if that lorry moves out at the wrong time, causes a collision, how many of these vehicles are going to end up just thudding along? I always remember my very early days as a driving instructor. I learnt a hard lesson. I had a Mini, and of course a new car didn't come with a spare wheel. And I got a flat tyre on a lesson, and I unfortunately had to be recovered, which was pretty embarrassing, but I learnt a good lesson that day. Went down the scrapyard and got myself a wheel. Now with that, I remember the recovery driver, who was an old boy, and he picked me up, and I asked him how long he'd been doing it. He said 35 years. And I said, well, I bet you've seen some changes. And he goes, yeah, do you know what the biggest one is? And he said, when I pick vehicles up after a crash now, it's not just the 2, the 5 or 6, because everyone's so bloody close. And he was spot on. There's something about, yes, we're congested nowadays, we're very busy, I understand that, but our following distances are pretty shocking overall, I think. So anyway, as per my advice, you take it how you want. That's only advice. That's your big boys and girls. That's not me saying John's doing something terrible or something wrong there. That's how I would deal with it with my pupils. That's how I deal with it personally when I'm in a reduced speed limit. When I came back from America, I think I've got some footage I'll play, and it's a reduced speed limit of 50, and you can see even though there's a lane separating me from this vehicle, I don't overtake them on the left. Someone else has a slightly different interpretation. For me, it's not about whether you would get pulled, whether you would get prosecuted. I go with the advice in the highway code on it. So that's just my opinion on it.